Hello and bonjour, you are watching Power Dilemma with Sarah Bukhari for TAG TV. Election writ has dropped in Ontario. All three major parties are vying to grab power of the Ontario Legislative Assembly. Let's get this cleared up. So where do we get this phrase, writ drop? The idea for a writ of election to form a parliament can be traced to 13th century England and the principles sowed by Magna Carta. Montreal language expert Howard Richler, who has researched Canadian election etymology, says the sense of the word drop is idiomatic, as in drop a line or drawing up a document. Originally, the term was draw up the writ, still used in some Commonwealth countries, but I guess drop the writ sounds much more exciting. Ontario Premier Kathleen Wayne announced yesterday that the Honourable Elizabeth Dowdeswell, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, has accepted the Premier's advice to sign a proclamation dissolving the 41st Parliament of the Province of Ontario, effective as of 2 p.m. May the 8th. Pursuant to the provisions of the Election Act, the Lieutenant Governor also called for the issuance of writ for the general election to be issued Wednesday, May 9th, that is today, and naming Thursday, June the 7th as the date of Ontario's next general election. Three major parties are locked in this election battle: our Progressive Conservative Party of Mr. Doug Ford, Liberal Party of Kathleen Wayne, and National Democratic Party headed by Andrea Haworth. So today, to discuss are the writ, the various election moods of the voters, and the party's platform, we have our regular commentator, political strategist, Ari Laskin. Ari is with Capitol Hill Group. Welcome to my show, Ari.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Okay, so with the writ dropping today, what does it mean for the Ontario public?
Well, we're going into an election. It means that you're going to get a lot more phone calls, a lot more knocks at the door from people that are trying to tell you why they're going to be a good representative to you. And it means that you're going to see a lot more political advertising and third-party advertising happening on the airways, be it radio, television, or even the internet now.
Okay, is this a change election? Is changing the incumbent the main objective of this election, Ari?
Well, I would say if you're looking at every single poll that has come out there, and the most recent one from Maclean's that was commissioned from Polaris Strategic Insights, puts the Progressive Conservative Party led by Doug Ford at 40%, with the New Democrats led by Andrea Horwath at 30%, and the Liberals at 23%. That tells me that it's a real big push for people want to see a change in government. 15 years of Liberal government is a very long time for a lot of people to fathom. Bear in mind, there's some people that have never seen another party in office in Ontario. They only know a Liberal government.
Okay, so when we say that the winds are for change in government in Ontario, let's talk about a few rights and wrongs of the Kathleen Wayne government. Ari.
Okay, well, how long do we have on the show? There's a lot of things that I think that this government has done that could have been improved significantly. There's a lot of things that this government has done that I think were actually moves in the right direction. I think that, excuse me, the introduction of all-day kindergarten was very helpful for a lot of parents that were struggling. I think that there is a lot of ideas that the government has put out there that have been very proactive and very positive. Investment in the innovative technologies and disruptive technology sector has been a very good move for the government, and as well as investment in the science and biotech sector has been a very important move for the government. However, if you're comparing that and we're looking at the scales here, I would say that 15 years of a fiscal mismanagement for a lot of people is very difficult to muster. You're looking at an increase in your hydro rates significantly. And what do you have to show for it? We still have periodic blackouts, although it's not bad like we had in back in the early 2000s, where there was a black power failure that cost the entire east coast of the United States and Canada. But you still have power surges that are causing power failures, but yet our hydro rates are going up. You still have an increase in terms of your overall taxes. And what do we have to show for it? Increased in hospital wait times and hallway medicine. Mm-hmm. Do we really have better healthcare? Do we really have more jobs out there that are full-time positions? I think that the government is very quick to say that they've created a lot more jobs over the past number of years than any other government. But if you look at these jobs compared to what people actually are able to sustain, these are part-time minimum wage jobs. And saying that, well, we've increased the minimum wage, in my opinion, doesn't really hold up to muster.
Mm-hmm. Ari, you have mentioned hallway healthcare. Do you think, in addition to healthcare, voters have some other concerns with the present Liberal government and they want to change it?
I think so. I think that a lot of people expect their politicians and their representatives to do exactly that, to represent them. And I think that a lot of people see a lot of insiders being rewarded for their loyal service to the government, or favors being granted, or all in all, just not above board transparency that Ontarians have come to expect and Canadians have come to expect from their government. And I don't think it's too much for us to ask for, and I don't think it's a hope and a dream to ask for a transparent government. It's disappointing to me that people immediately assume that politicians will lie, cheat, and steal. Mm-hmm. That's simply not the case. And it's important that we have transparency in our government, and that, to me, is what I'm hearing in conversations with people, and what I'm hearing when I'm walking on the street and just listening around. People are disappointed that, oh, there's another scandal. Well, what do you expect? It's politicians being politicians. That is not the norm, and that should not be what Ontarians have come to expect of their politicians and their government. Okay,
so Ari, having talked about the change in government, I am just focusing on and trying to get the answer. What are the various ridings or geographic locations where voters determine the change in the government? What are those suburbs?
Like the swing ridings, you mean?
Mm-hmm. What are those ridings?
Typically, and if we're looking at the historic swing ridings,
mm-hmm.
The 905 belt is a very big, like the immediate 905 that's just right around the city of Toronto. Typically is a swing riding, or swing ridings, I should say. A fair chunk of York region can be a swing riding. There's different pockets throughout the province that I would say have typically and historically been, well, they could go either way. It could go Liberal, it could mm-hmm. go Conservative, it could go Liberal, or it could go New Democrat, or it could go Green Party or New Democrat. Like, there's a number of those ridings out there historically. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't think that we're looking at swing ridings in Ontario. I think that we're going to be looking at a fair sweep of specific regions, mm-hmm. and those regions are going to go en masse. You're not going to see pockets emerging in different areas. Mm-hmm. This is really the first day of the campaign. Mm-hmm. I could be very wrong, and we could see something dramatic happen. I don't suspect, though, that you're going to see a dramatic campaign, really. The appetite for change, as I mentioned earlier, is very strong in Ontario.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you think that newcomers to Canada, newcomers to Ontario are going to play an important role in bringing change to Ontario?
I think that there's going to be, well, yes and no. It depends on if these individuals feel empowered to get out there and make their voice heard. I hope that they do, because you know what, these are Ontarians, just like everybody else, that have a right to have their voice heard and expressed, and I think that's important. I think, though, that you're going to see targeting of various demographics, really, in this election. You'll see Liberals and New Democrats really focusing on young Ontarians, young families, new graduates, and current students. And you'll have the Progressive Conservatives, my guess is, focus on pretty much everybody. They're opening up a big tent party that they have everybody from students to retirees to new Canadians to people that are starting up their families to people that that are empty nesters. I would say that the parties are going to be focusing on various demographics, but the party that's going to win is going to be the party that looks at everybody as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So Ari, let's talk a little bit about the blame game by Kathleen Wayne on Doug Ford. She has been referring Doug Ford to Donald Trump, the president of the U.S. How is public viewing this blame game by Kathleen Wayne?
I think a lot of people are looking at it as a very petty move on her part. Mm-hmm. This is a brush that's being painted of anybody that's a conservative is now being compared to Donald Trump, right or wrong. People think that he's a horrible person or people think he's a wonderful person. But I think that you should be measuring people up to what they've done and what their merits are, not somebody else, and not trying to conflate an issue or conflate the situation like the Premier is doing presently. Mm-hmm. Saying that Mr. Ford is Donald Trump, I think she's sort of reaching for something to say at this point and just trying to throw at whatever mud she can find mm-hmm. To try to muddy the waters, if you will.
Very desperate move by her.
Yeah, for her, desperate times call for desperate measures. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Doug Ford, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, is shown to be top of the polls. Why is Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservative Party resonating among Ontarians?
Well, I think, first of all, if you've ever heard Doug speak at a rally, mm-hmm. and you watch how he's speaking and how he's engaging the audience and the crowd there, he's speaking to every individual, and it's almost as if he's speaking to you individually. He's not using scripting, much to the dismay of his staff, I'm sure, and he's talking as a normal, regular Ontarian, mm-hmm. Regular person who goes through the same sort of frustrations that other people have gone through. Getting stuck in traffic. He announced a big investment in mass transit and public transit today. That was very impressive. Dealing with education, dealing with healthcare, dealing with hospitals, dealing with just what the normal, regular stuff that people have to deal with. And speaking to people on that level and focusing on that, I think is really resonating with a lot of people. And the PCs, their ideas are not far-fetched. These are logical ideas that make sense, that people are looking at this in terms of we want to be able to support other people. We want to be able to have the ability to invest in our healthcare, invest in our futures, invest in our businesses. But the only way we can do that is if we have our fiscal house in order. And I think a lot of Ontarians are looking at the Progressive Conservatives as the only party that's really able to get the books in order.
Mm-hmm. Ari, what is the message you're going to give to our viewers who are voters, who could be voters in this election, which is going to be on June the 7th?
I would say get out and vote. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing ever. This is your opportunity to participate in democracy. It's one of the greatest things ever, and take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. Get out and vote. If you're a Tory, go out and help out the Progressive Conservative candidate in your riding. If you're a Liberal, go and help them out. Go and help out the NDP. Whoever you support, help them out. Get involved and get your ideas heard, and make sure that you have your voice heard as well on June the 7th. And if you can't make it June the 7th, there's going to be advanced polling days mm-hmm. that I'm sure every single campaign will bombard everybody with the dates and times of when and locations of when those polls will be open. But make sure that you get out there and vote. It's your right. You might as well use it.
Okay, it was so good to talk to you, Ari, and we're going to talk to you again next Wednesday as we head into this election. And with this, viewers, we're going to take a short break, and once we come back, we're going to talk more about Election Ontario 2018. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Power Dilemmas with Sarah Bukhari. Before the break, we were talking about the writ being dropped today, May the 9th, in Ontario, and we are headed towards Ontario election, June the 7th. And we're going to talk about more about the change which Ontario voters are seeking, the platforms of various parties, who is the favorite, and what are the voters really seeking in a leader. So to talk about this and to answer these questions, we have our very good commentator, political strategist, Brett McDermott. Welcome to my show, Brett.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Brett, with the writ dropping today, what does it mean to Ontario public?
Well, now the debate will be in full swing about the future of the province. And I mean, there has been a debate for, well, a few months, even a couple of years now, on the future of the province. And now voters will hear a lot more of pitches from political parties on where the province should go. And there are some very clear different views on where the province should go. Liberals are offering one vision, NDP, Greens, and Conservatives, very different visions.
Okay, so Brett, do you think this election is for change and Ontarians are looking for change in government in Ontario? Because we have the Liberals for the past 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, the Liberals have been the government for 15 years. There was a brief minority government period, I guess, in there between 2011 and 2014. But they have been the government for 15 years. And the polls suggest that this is an election where voters are looking for change. But as I think has been clear in the past, polls have also been wrong. So sometimes they're usually more often than not right, but sometimes they've been wrong. So I'll add that caveat that it may be a change election, it may not be. It depends on what the voters ultimately say on June 7th. The next 4 weeks will speak to what voters will say on June 7th.
Mm-hmm. So we're saying that voters are looking for change, and why? What are the basic reasons, or what are the major reasons the voters are looking for change of government? What has Kathleen Wayne done, and what has she not done? What are the rights and wrongs which she has done in the past 4 years?
Well, I mean, from a fiscal standpoint, she and her government have promised repeatedly over the last few years, last 4 or 5 years, to balance the budget. They claim to have balanced the budget, I believe it was the last fiscal year, 2016-17. However, that was predicated on tabling unaudited financial statements in the legislature, which, to my understanding, is without precedent. So on the fiscal side and the management side of the province and government, I think the government is probably a little bit weak. On other matters, however, they have clearly tried to spend a lot of money to promote social justice, equality of opportunity, a fairer society. I received a letter in the mail from my Liberal MPP in my riding in Toronto, which had the headline "Fairness for All." Of course, what is fair is certainly up for major debate, and there's many different opinions on that. But they're clearly a government that's committed to social welfare spending, social services spending, and trying to lift up low-income Ontarians. Whether their policies do that or not is really another debate altogether. So on the issue on the question of promoting equal opportunity, social justice, they're clearly committed to that. Fiscal responsibility and good management, I'd say less so.
Okay, so having talked about the change in government, what are the various suburbs around Ontario which are going to determine this election?
So around the Toronto area, in the Greater Toronto area, the 905 region, there's a huge basket of ridings in that area. I think it's about 47 ridings, counting the city of Toronto and everything from Oshawa to Newmarket to Burlington. So those ridings, especially in the 905 region, will be, I think, the big deciding factors. Although, excuse me, suburban Ottawa ridings as well will make a big difference, and then smaller cities like London, Kitchener, Cambridge, Peterborough, etc. Those are cities, medium-sized cities, smaller cities, where moving from Liberal to Conservative MPPs or New Democrat MPPs will be the big question. Will they move from the Liberals right now? Because most of those smaller cities are represented by the Liberals right now. Those will be your battleground regions: 905 around Toronto and suburban Ottawa, and smaller to medium-sized cities.
Okay, and what are the major concerns of these voters in these ridings?
Well, I think the one issue that continues popping up and has popped up for a number of years in Ontario is affordable hydro, and the Liberals have clearly staked out some ground on that issue. In that they I think believe that higher hydro rates are a necessity in the province in order to transition to a greener energy infrastructure. But if you look at historical standards from hydro rates, the hydro rates are very high. So the question is that good for the economy? Is that not good for the economy? Because you could argue that higher hydro rates encourage people to save more, conserve more on their consumption. But of course, if people have to choose between buying groceries and paying their hydro bill, that's not a decision that we want to have to make.
And the voters are blaming it on the Liberal Kathleen Wayne government that their hydro bills are skyrocketing.
Yes, I mean the decisions the government has made have contributed to higher hydro rates for sure. Clearly, there are some long-term challenges in the Ontario electricity system in terms of the infrastructure we've got that predates their government. But the Liberal government has clearly made decisions to try and make a greener, so-called greener energy supply infrastructure in the province, and the trade-off on that is that the cost of hydro is much higher.
Okay, so what do you think about this hallway healthcare system, which everyone is talking about, and both the opposition camps, the PCs and the NDPs, they want to change the hallway healthcare system? And what do you mean by hallway healthcare system?
Well, hallway healthcare is where if you're in a hospital and there's not enough space for your bed in a room, your bed is then moved into a hallway. So that optically is not good for the government. But these type of challenges have occurred before in Ontario, and are probably likely to occur in the future. The healthcare budget has occupied a bigger and bigger portion of the provincial government budget now. If I remember correctly, the healthcare occupies about 50% of the operating budget of the province. So that's huge, no doubt about it. So clearly, there's a desire and a need to shift some primary care out of the hospital setting, and that has been done, dating back to the 1990s. But the reality is that if there's too many people coming to a hospital at a certain time, then patients will be laying in a bed in the hallway, and optically that's not good for the government. But I'm not sure what options they have at this point with the election a month away.
Okay, so in your opinion, among the three major parties, which party is going to win?
Well,
according to the polls and according to the research.
Look, the polls suggest that the PCs are going to win and form government for the first time since 2003. But again, as I mentioned earlier, polls can be inaccurate sometimes, and polls predicted that the New Democrats would win in BC in 2013, and the Wild Rose Party would win in Alberta in 2012, and of course the polls were wrong. Now, that some of the pollsters said that there was movement by voters right at the last minute. So, you know, if I had to bet on it, I'd bet on the PCs winning, but I think lots of things could happen in the next 4 weeks.
Okay, before we end up, I just wanted to talk about the blame game by Kathleen Wynne on Doug Ford. She's repeatedly referring Doug Ford to Donald Trump, the president of the U.S. What do you think the public is viewing these allegations as?
I think the public will see through that to some extent because, well, you know, Doug is a down-to-earth businessman who has a lot of experience and success in business. He's not a carbon copy of Donald Trump. It's really an unfair, I think, comparison. Donald Trump is not a free trader. He's not very committed to free trade.
So you think this is an unfair comparison?
I do. I think that Doug Ford is absolutely committed to the North American Free Trade Agreement, right? And for promoting Ontario to be open for business, as he said, and that would include, you know, doing business with the U.S. and Mexico. So there's a clear difference there.
Okay, so what are the few traits in Doug Ford for the reason he's resonating among public and he is top in the polls?
He does well as a manager. He presents well as a manager. He's got a good record as a manager, and that is a clear contrast to the Liberal government, where I think, as I mentioned earlier, they have, I think, some poor credentials on management. So Doug clearly will emphasize in this campaign, and the PCs will emphasize good management of the province. They'll emphasize balancing the budget, especially. I think they'll probably make an issue out of the government tabling unaudited financial statements. So that's a clear differentiating factor. He's clearly a manager, somebody who wants to deliver value for money to taxpayers, as he puts it. Kathleen Wynne's and Andrea Horwath's appeals to the voters are quite different. Okay.
Perfect. Brett, it was so good to talk to you today, and we will be talking to you in the coming weeks about the developments around the Ontario election. You have a good day.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. You too.
So, viewers, today is May the 9th, and as our program was based on, the writ has dropped, which means all the parties are in campaign mode. Again, Canada is a democratic country. We are all here to use our right, which is our vote. So choose your leaders, choose the leader which will be heading Ontario with a lot of research, participate in your campaigns, know the leader in your riding, and vote, because it is your democratic right. With this, we are going to take off, and we will see you next Wednesday at Power Dilemmas with me, Sarah Bukhari. Ciao.